Let's talk about buying a 997. How amazing. A friend of mine recently bought this and I helped him buy it. And I was telling another friend of mine about it and he said, why don't you make a video telling people how to buy a specific car and what to look for when you're buying a Porsche? I think I made one video a while ago, but that was more of a generic video about buying cars and of course Porsches, but this is specifically about the 997, I think. And there's certain things that we should look for. It's just general stuff like this beautiful Alcantara roof, or maybe it's suede back in the day. Don't know, can't tell the difference. It's very easy to get excited when you're buying a car and you see something you really like. Once your emotions take over and you think, I really want this, you start overlooking the things that you would notice otherwise. So hopefully this video will help you focus and you can make some notes as you're watching it. We have a term in English which goes, beggars can't be choosers. So when you're buying a second-hand car, it sort of applies because you don't have the ability to choose the right spec. So make a list of all the key things that you're looking for and that are a must. So maybe there'll be a top 3 or top 5 things that are a must. And then the rest is a nice to have. And then by that you can shortlist the cars that you see, because every Porsche will be different. And it's really difficult to then find a car that has everything that you want, because it's virtually impossible. And if you do end up finding one, then you're very lucky. But I mean, I've had very mixed experiences. I've probably never been able to find a perfect car. There's always something you have to compromise on. Today I am going to quickly cover some basic things, specifically buying Porsches, and this particular model, which is a 997, it seems is in quite popular demand these days. So many people are looking for Porsches and this particular model is very popular, and recently it's going up in value, and one of my friends recently bought this car and I helped him with the search and the purchase of the car. So I thought I should make a quick video and show others what to look for and how to choose what kind of a car to buy. First of all, your budget is a very important thing. You need to know how much money you're going to spend, and you should try to buy a car with the least amount of owners and the lowest mileage you can find, and choose a 4-year age bracket to say between, I don't know, 2002 and 2006 are the cars that I'm going to buy. It will help you create a targeted search for the car that you're going to buy. Now, the 997s come in 2 variants, 0.1 and 0.2 generation. The differences are very subtle. On the outside, the rear brake lights are different in the 0.2, but this is a 0.1 version. The big differences between the version 1 and version 2 is the engine and the gearbox. This one has an old-fashioned torque converter gearbox, whereas the .2 version has a PDK. So if you're after a PDK, you need to go for a .2 version. But this video is specifically about what to look for when you're buying a car. So very important things to start off with at the front. Look at the headlights, look at the bonnet and the bumper, because these cars driven at high speeds on motorways and various country roads will have stone chips on the front, and it's important to look for those. And most of the dealers will paint the front bonnet and the bumper, and sometimes the wheel arches as well. The headlights usually not, because they can't be painted, but you can buff them and remove the scratches. So look out for that, see if they've been buffed too much, because that makes it weaker. Then a very important thing to do when you're buying a second-hand car is to open the bonnet and look at these things, because if the car had a front head-on collision, you would have repair marks and you would see some new things, something overly clean and tidy. For example, these bolts in this car have a lot of rust on them, which means they've been there for a long time, because if they had any kind of repair, they would have removed these screws. If there is a little bit of I don't know, rust or something, it's nothing to be worried about, because it's a tiny bit of rust or things can happen in Porsche, especially because the front bay has these little channels which sometimes get covered with debris and get damp. The other thing to do is to lift the battery compartment cover and look underneath. All this section should usually be dirty, and even if it's clean, none of the bolts should look like they have been removed. If they're old and they have rust on them, that's a good sign. That means no one has touched it. You can lift these rubbers at the front and look underneath this section to see if there are any signs of repair. Usually they shouldn't be. The next thing to do is to look under the wheel arches all around to see if the protectors are in a good condition, and also to see if these things have been replaced, because if they have been replaced, there's a good chance that the car had a collision on one of the sides. Brake discs, of course. Let me show you up close. So the brake discs, you can just touch it with your finger and see if there is a lip. And if there is a lip, then you know how much of that has been used and whether you would need to replace the brake discs. Same thing, you can look through here and you can see the brake pads, so you'll know what condition they're in, how much they've been used. Of course, check out the alloy wheels all around. At the moment it's quite dirty, but you can see if there's scratches, because when you're selling the car, people usually want clean alloy wheels. Of course, the condition of the tires, if it has feathering, which means it's been taken on a track a lot. Look at the tread depth. Look at the wing mirrors, because they will have scratches from stone chips and things like that. Then check the windscreen. Porsches are notorious for really very scratchable windscreens. They're very thin. I think they'd want to reduce weight. So whenever you have any kind of dust on the windscreen, and if you end up using a dry wiper, the dust or the sand particles will scratch the windscreen. So it's very important to always use water first and then switch on the wipers. So if you have scratches or stone chips, you need to look out for those. Also with Porsches you get stone chips on the top, because the stone hits, and because of the curves and things, they end up going all over the car. Right now this car was parked under a tree, so it's covered in pollen, but otherwise it's an immaculate, well maintained and kept car. So when you come to the back of the car, again, the same things you're looking for are signs of accidents. So if you step back from the car, you should be able to see all the dividing partitions of various panels. Are they equal distance on all sides? Because if there is more of a gap here than on the other side, that means the bumper might have been removed and not fitted back properly. Similarly, these things will have differences. Obviously activate the spoiler manually with the button and check if it works. Look at the lights, check if they have any kind of gaps around them. Similarly, when you're at the front, it's important to look at the whole line that goes around the bonnet to make sure all the distance is equal. And you don't need a measuring tool. Our eyes are good enough to see if the gaps are wider or narrower in some place, because that will tell you if that has been moved, repaired, removed. And the other thing you can do is to look at the side. So if you look at the side of the car, or not just Porsches, any cars, you can look through the reflection of the paintwork. All across it will tell you whether the car has been repainted, and especially if it's been repainted badly, you'll see that the reflection is different from one side to another. Then other things like look under the car, it's very important to look at the condition of the exhausts and then go under it, which many people wouldn't. Now, all Porsches and all sports cars will have this kind of a look underneath. Nothing to worry about, because it gets so hot that all the metal always changes color. So it's perfectly fine, but just look for signs of repair. If things have been removed and replaced, there won't be rust on the screws, there won't be rust on things, they'll be too clean. Then you need to ask the questions. Look for signs of oil leaking, because the rear main seal on these cars sometimes leaks, and it's important to have a look. If possible, put it on a ramp or get an expert to come and have a look. Let's open the boot. When you open the engine bay, which you can on the 997s, after this you can't, you can look inside and see if there are any new parts. If things have been removed, replaced, you'll see signs, but also you'll see if the car has been well maintained and looked after, because the engine bay, the condition of the belts, all of these things will tell you whether the car has been looked after. So the age of the car should be reflected in the mileage and the condition of the car. Very few cars will be immaculately maintained, and it doesn't matter whether they've had too many miles or not. It depends on the owner. So things like these rubbers, quite expensive to replace, but can be easily damaged if the car is not well maintained and looked after. When you open the doors, look for signs around here. Obviously having a sticker means a very positive thing, but make sure it's not a new sticker. It's been around for the life of the car, because if there was a side collision they would have had to fix it and paint it and replace it. Of course, the door sill, every time you get in and out, your shoe hits this and this, so you will have marks, which is a good sign. Condition of the carpet, and then the bolsters, very important, because when you get in and out of the Porsche, it is very difficult to go out and come like that, so you always end up brushing against this, and over time that will change its quality and it will look used. When you're looking at the back seats of the car, very rarely will you see any signs of usage, because most people who have Porsches don't end up driving them with kids in the back, and if they do, it's for short journeys. But obviously this car doesn't look like ever had any people in the back, because it's completely untouched and immaculate, which is fantastic. Of course, you can see signs of scratches on here, which means people getting in and out would have scratched the back, and obviously this car is quite clean in that regard. Inside, it's very good and important to check all the electrics, so switch on all the lights, indicators, the sat nav, the sound system, air conditioning, because all of these things individually cost a lot of money to repair and fix or replace. So while you're buying the car, even if you decide to buy a car with some fault, it's better to know what the fault is, so you can use that to haggle the price down, rather than buying it and then having a problem to fix it later on and then paying extra money for it. These little cup holders, for example, people may not notice them and not care about them, but this clicking sound is very important to see if it works, because if this thing doesn't work, then when you put the cup in, it comes out and the cup comes flying. So check these little things. Another tip, when you're using the cup holders, make sure you close this, because once this is closed, it doesn't move. So when you're going around bends, the cups don't move. Otherwise, with the weight, they will move around. So just a little tip. These cup holders are my favorite thing in Porsches. I don't know why they have discontinued them in the new models, because they are amazing. They disappeared, they save space, and they're so functional. Glove compartment, of course, always good to look in and see what condition it is, because glove compartment is used fairly regularly and it will reflect the age of the car. Now, everything that I touch in this car, it's so clean and so good. It's very difficult to use this car as an example of something that has aged and has signs of aging, because it's a very low mileage car and it's been immaculately maintained, which is why as soon as my friends saw it, we were quite eager to buy it as soon as possible, because cars like this don't stay on the market for too long. As soon as they come, they're sold, because people know they're hard to find. Then comes the thing about test driving the car. Now, if I drove this car, I wouldn't be able to explain to you in a calm fashion what kind of things you should be looking for. So look for rattles in the steering wheel. When you're driving, imagine the noise being transmitted through the steering shaft into the steering wheel, and try to get a feel of if there is any wobbly things that you feel. The German cars should feel solid rock. There should be no play, no movements. If you feel anything, get a specialist to look at the car. Similarly, in the back, you should check that the tires are worn equally on both sides, and when you accelerate, the car shouldn't be pulling on any side. Same thing with braking. When you brake hard, the car should stop in the same direction equally on all wheels, rather than going sideways or even moving tiny bit, which means that one of the brakes isn't functioning as well as it should. Maybe it's damaged, maybe the brake fluid has got a problem, maybe the discs or pads, could be anything, but it's better to know and test those things. Check the gear lever to check all the gears function. When you drive the car, make sure you push it into each gear and see if the gears change properly, if it's automatic. And if it's manual, you need to check the clutch to make sure that the clutch has enough grip in it. So basically, when you release the clutch, if it's an on-off clutch, as it's called, basically when you release the clutch, there's no movement, slow movement in the car, it just goes bang. That means the clutch plate or the pressure plate are damaged or on their way out. It should have a little bit of room, so when you're releasing the clutch, the car gently starts to creep forward, and then you feel the full power of the engine taking over. Of course, in sports cars, they have these on-off clutches, but those are not in these cars. So those are track cars and very basic and different ones. So in Porsches, there should be some room. So when you release the clutch, it gets to a point where you can feel that the car is now starting to move, until the point where it ends and the car is now fully taken over by the engine. So that there should be some room. It shouldn't be touch and immediate move, because then the clutch is going to die. The other thing with the manual you can do is put it into second or third gear, release the clutch, start coasting, and gently accelerate a little bit so it gets a little bit of speed, and then slam your foot down on the accelerator. The revs will go up very fast, but the speed won't match the revs, which means that the clutch plate is slipping and the revs are going higher and the car isn't moving. Otherwise, you'd have smooth increase in speed. This is a very brief video, because of course you can spend hours looking at the car and trying to figure out what you're trying to do and look for. But I thought I should make one video about buying a 997 or a used Porsche, because we've just spent nearly 2 months looking for cars and going through the pros and cons, and then finding this particular one and buying it. So thanks for watching, and more videos to come.